our business area, which for you to understand is the, let's say, the entity that is responsible, right, for the goods that we're receiving and we're transacting within the system financially, okay? It's a classification here, as you can see when we look at the business areas, and we're going to be seeing a lot of this when we pull reports from BI. It's the way that the UN entities are classified, okay, in our master data. And then again, plant, when we're talking about plant, the location where the materials are purchased, produced, and stored, as we saw before. Okay, so this is what we call the key reference data, okay, whether we're talking about data linked to Ipsos, business areas, or plants. Now, it doesn't end there, so we keep going and we learn of the common types of master data used in the UN, okay? So the business partner master data defines the person, group, or organization with whom the UN has a business interest, okay? So a business partner can be assigned different roles, whether it's vendor, customer, and sponsor. So business partners will also be part of our master data, the same as materials, okay? And the materials containing information, for example, about the products procured, stored, and shipped by the UN, and then the services, as we saw before. We were talking about materials and services before, but we hadn't seen the business partner master data yet. So business partners, materials, and services are all part of the master data that we're going to be working with and transacting with throughout these next few days. Let's go to our following slide to see if maybe this helps us understand it a little better. Okay, so the material master data contains information about the products procured, stored, and shipped, and it determines how materials will be managed. Okay, so we're falling back now on the materials. We're focusing on the materials again, and we're understanding that in the UN, we have a unique ID of a material or service. So whatever material we're working with or transacting with, or service that we're working with or transacting with, will have a unique ID. And this is what we call the product ID. For example, if we're talking about a projector, in this case, this projector will have a product ID, which is 150001517. Okay, this is an example again. All right, so every time we make reference to this in the system, this projector will always be linked to this product ID, which is going to define it as either an equipment, a fixed asset, an expendable, or so on, but it's always going to be a material, okay? Everything is a material, but within those materials, we have a breakdown of if something is an expendable, an equipment, or a fixed asset, and we'll see how that works in a bit. Okay, so these product IDs are part of our material master, which in a sense is broken down into categories. So if we're still talking about our projector, we need to know that these projectors will fall into a specific category, and this specific category will also have its nomenclature, and it may fall under the category for projectors, or it may fall under a category for technical supply, or I don't know, computer supplies. It depends on the product category name that has been given to it in the material master. And then we're also talking about the material management settings. So the material master information that we have in the system not only defines the product ID that we're going to be using for this material, the category that it falls under, but also how it's managed. So the material master, this specific material that we have bought, let's say, for example, we've created a shopping cart and we're buying some goods. These goods, as we receive them, since they're attached to a product ID, right, because the product ID is the material, this product ID linked to the material master is going to define if this specific product, material, equipment, fixed asset, or expendable has to be serialized or flagged for inspection automatically. So we'll realize as we receive goods and we transact with them, sometimes we're going to be receiving goods, we're going to forget to perform a step in the system, and the system itself is going to warn us and say, hey, this material that you're trying to put into your inventory needs to be serialized. It needs to be flagged for quality inspection. Okay, so depending on the specific indications that this material has in the material master, it will automatically be flagged for a specific requirement in the system. That's why the material master data is so important here too. And last but not least, also the financial management implications. Okay, so again, this same piece of material, let's say we're only talking about a projector, will have a specific product ID, we'll have a specific category, we'll have a specific way of dealing with it, right? Of managing it. Does it need to be serialized? Does it need to be batch managed? What needs to be done? Does it need to be inspected? All that will be also told by the material master data, but also the GL account derived from the product category, asset, and or equipment valuation class will be linked to this projector as well. Okay, and that's all because of the material master data that we have in the system. Okay, for you guys to understand how this works, okay, the material number, also known as product ID. So each time we make reference to material, we're talking about product ID. It's a synonym, is used to uniquely identify a good. Okay, the material number is associated with the item for its entire life cycle, from the time of requisitioning, from the time we purchased the good, all the way to its disposal. So when we talk about a projector at the beginning of the training, when we're receiving goods, we're going to be talking about that projector maybe when we talk about the write-off and on the last day, okay? And this is just a brief image. Sometimes these pictures help understand the process a lot better. So let's say that we have bought or purchased a product ID here for the projector. We've put it in our shopping cart and gone through the process of purchasing the goods. This product ID is linked to this projector throughout its life cycle, okay? Completely. All right, let's go to our next screen here. All right, so besides the general characteristics, as we saw before, materials have other characteristics or flags, okay, which if set, depending on the materials that we're purchasing, have an impact on how the material is treated during activities in logistics and finance, etc. Okay, so we'll learn throughout the processes of the training, and you'll learn a lot more when you're deployed in the mission, that dealing with one piece of equipment or with one material or another has different implications in terms of the transactions you're performing. Some will require more steps, some will require less steps, some will require more roles involved, people that are working in funds management or finance, and how to deal with specific materials. Okay, some of these materials will be serialized or will need to be serialized. So these will have a serialization flag when you're processing them in the system that require serialization, barcoding upon receipt. And we'll see that in our first few transactions tomorrow. Okay, and this is necessary to create records in the equipment master record. Okay, so we have a material master record, but as we receive the goods, if something is an equipment, and we'll see that a bit more in detail in the next few slides, it needs to be serialized. And when we serialize it, what we're telling the system is, hey, this material is an equipment, okay? So it needs to be treated a specific way, and it is assigned what we call a serialization number. Okay, for example, the servers would be a good example of that type of material. We also have other materials which are batched managed. Okay, so what does that mean? So for example, if we're receiving blood or vaccines and these have an expiration date, or the vendor batch information, or shelf life information, so things that expire, right? Things that need to be taken care of a specific way. They need to be held in a specific section in the warehouse that keeps it at a certain temperature. So these need to be batch managed, like for example, rations. Okay, these are not treated the same way as the ones that are serialized. These will, when you're transacting with them, you'll have to keep them in mind in a different way. Okay, when you're receiving them, the same thing. Okay, and again here, the last, quality managed. So materials quality managed have an inspection requirement at receipt, okay, usually based on contractual terms, like for example, vaccines. So maybe vaccines need to be batch managed, but they also need to be quality managed, right? When we're received, they can't just go directly into inventory in the warehouse. There may need to be an inspection performed before they are received. Okay, so another thing for you to understand, the material master data defines this, right? The material itself has a specific way of dealing with it. And when we receive these materials into the system, they are flagged for specific